Stand up for me real quick, one time. Stand up, stand up, stand up. Don't be scared, as you can. Let's do this. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. What? Say what? Turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking. Say what? Okay. That's right. Ain't gonna let no White House turn me around. What? Say what? Ain't gonna let no White House turn me around. We're gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. One more time. Ain't gonna let no police turn me around. What? Say what? Ain't gonna let no police turn me around. We're gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to Freedom Road. That's right. Yes. Now, ever since I was a very young child, I don't know, my mother's daughter, son, something, I was somebody. You know, my mother taught my sister and I freedom songs. We learned to sing our way to freedom in my mother's arms, just like we learned to read in her lap, sitting on the floor of Liberation Bookstore in Harlem. But see, before she was my mother, Moms coordinated the breakfast program of the Black Panther Party's New York chapter. And before she was my mother, she helped edit the Black Panther newspaper. Before that, my mother was a member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Before that, she traveled across Europe with a circus. I don't know too many black women that done did that. That was a surprise to me. She integrated a white university in the Midwest. She survived child abuse and abandonment. But first she was born to Jamaican parents in Brooklyn and fatally diagnosed with sickle cell anemia. It was my mother, this black woman, who took me to the Black Writers Conference at Medgar Evers at the age of 13 when she heard that I was gay. She heard that, I don't know how she knew. And she heard that black lesbian writer Barbara Smith was going to be on a panel there. Now, I remember how my mom dragged me to the mic and whispered fiercely in my ear. She said, "Tell them you're a lesbian." I was like, no. My mother is very persuasive. I did it. And it was my mother who brought me to the New Eurekan Poets Cafe and challenged me to my first slam. It was my mom who put me on the stage at Audre Lorde's I'm Your Sister conference in 1990, and again at her funeral at St. John the Divine 2 years later. I was 16. Time and time again, in defiance of the deadly media stereotypes born of 3 decades of domestic war on black and brown bodies, framed as a war on drugs, crime, and terror, my mom taught me to see art and culture as my purest forms of prayer, to understand ideological power as a cornerstone of social change, to love the people with all my heart, to recognize that hearts and minds are the drivers of collective action. She told me we are willing to risk because of what we believe is possible, what we believe. She taught me that knowledge is not power, only power is power. My mother raised me as a Panther cub, but also unwittingly, she raised me to be a communication strategist. It's also because of her that I could not remain a communication strategist. I needed to understand the infrastructure and rules that were the foundation for ideological power. I needed to understand what the technology of whiteness was so that I could talk about and build the technology of liberation. For me, black liberation, liberation of humanity. I needed to know, what is the media and technology environment human and civil rights need to thrive? What will it take to win dignity, rights, and power in a digital age? To answer that question, I couldn't only focus on the front-end narratives we read, watch, and listen to in the media, while cable and broadcast continue to be owned by a white majority. People of color make up over 36% of the U.S. population, but own fewer than 7% of radio licenses and less than 3% of television licenses. Who is telling our story today? The same is true of the internet. Today, 4 companies provide cable, phone, and internet service to 70% of the country and deny adequate broadband service to 30% of all American households, the vast majority of which are what? You guessed it, Black, Latino, Native, rural, and poor. Who is telling our story today? The prison phone industry is no better. Securist and Global Tel-Link control the lion's share of this $1.2 billion a year industry and prey upon the families of incarcerated people by charging exorbitant fees that make it impossible to stay in touch with loved ones, even though family ties are proven to reduce recidivism. Who is telling our stories today? While America's most vulnerable communities are being denied access to a modern communication system in one of the world's wealthiest nations, digital and communications technologies are being used to profile, police, and punish those same people. Let me tell you this. 1 in 2 American adults are already in a facial recognition network. That's not the future, that's today. Who's telling your story today? From data mining to punish the destitute, to law enforcement tools that punish protesters and turn communities of color into open-air prisons, the tools of mass surveillance exacerbate mass incarceration, exacerbate racial hierarchy, and demolish democracy. Who is telling the story today? Now, I founded the Center for Media Justice in 2009 with 2 of my friends, Amy Sunny and Jen Soriano, because I wanted to confront these conditions. I wanted to transform media and technology rights and policy in the service of racial and economic justice. I wanted to build the ideological power to win, but also the media and communications and technology infrastructure to live with real dignity. So we built a base of organizations rooted in communities of color, committed to transforming these conditions. We worked together. Now we have 97 organizations across the United States collaborating. It's dope. You know, we built a national coalition called the Campaign for Prison Phone Justice. We organized the families of incarcerated people. We won the first ever cap on calls from prison. That's dope. We mobilized racial justice leadership in action. We won an affordable, open, and secure internet in 2015 and 16. I'm talking about net neutrality. We won broadband privacy. We won low-income subsidies. We won all this. And then what happened? Donald Trump came into office. In a few short months, his white nationalist administration had rolled back every single victory. And not only that, but have been given the keys to this vast system of mass surveillance. We in trouble, y'all. But we still out here, because what? We ain't gonna let nobody turn us around. We still out here. We still fighting. We're fighting against discriminatory hate speech and censorship at Facebook, and to prevent social media companies from unduly cooperating with law enforcement to spy on users of colors. We're resisting the FBI's designation of Black activists as domestic terrorists simply because we have a Black identity. We're preventing predictive risk assessment from being used to increase racial disparities in prisons, jails, and detention centers, and that electronic monitors aren't used to change the location but not the condition of incarceration for anyone, but especially for our children and our migrant families. We're training our communities on how to be secure, but grounded in the knowledge that our best security comes from our love for each other. Let me say this. My mother lived her entire life with a fatal disease. It sharpened her thirst for freedom, and her thirst for freedom and her life sharpened mine. My wife is living with stage 4 cancer right now. My demand for the kind of cultural change that will sustain her beautiful Black life and all of our lives is as urgent as ever. I want to live with dignity. I want her to be able to live with dignity. And I want our future generations to be able to live with dignity. But I know this, in a nation where the first currency was Black bodies and the early surveillance systems were slave passes, In a nation that profits when we die, in a nation built on indigenous genocide, whose citizenship and security is fueled by white nationalism, in that nation, culture cannot be extracted from politics. In fact, it's what drives it. Protecting civil rights in the 21st century demands that we update constitutional protections to align with a digital age. We need to correspond those human rights. We need to correspond that with human rights on a global scale. I'm saying that the future of labor demands that we shift power at the point of digital production, that we understand data as capital, that we deal with the questions of automation to reduce income inequality, not expand it. Right? When tech companies come to our towns, our cities need to protect our affordable housing, our schools, our roads, our transportation system, and our residents from the gentrifying forces tech companies can be. The point here is this: in the 21st century, media and digital rights are civil and human rights. They're not secondary, they weren't then, and they're not now. The lesson that my mom taught me is very simple and stated beautifully by Brother Minister Christopher Muhammad. He said, disorganized truth can be easily overcome by a well-organized lie. Let me say that one more time for you. Disorganized truth can be easily overcome by a well-organized lie. So long as force, lies, and crumbs are used to scapegoat, stereotype, and brutally censor bodies like mine to death, being right will never be enough. We have to be real, we have to be ready, and we have to be powerful. There's too much at stake. We have to invest in organizing truth. When I say organize, you say truth. Organize, organize. When I say media, you say justice. Media, media. Organize, organize. Media, media. Thank you, and I'm out.